بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا. We are on Surah al-Maʿārij, Surah number 70, ayah number 25, 26. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the insan has been created in a very insecure way, with insecurity, always panicking, and always greedy. Halu'a. Inna al-insana khuliqa halu'a. Ayah number 16, 19. So, and then Allah explains that when anything bad or evil falls upon man, and he is terrified and he freaks out. And when anything good happens to man, then he is extremely possessive, manu'a, not willing to share. Except a few people who have these 8 characteristics. So they will not be included in that group. We've discussed a few of them. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ, except those who do salat. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ, those who are permanently engaged in salat. وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ, and those who recognize that the one asking for help and the one asking for donation has a right in his wealth. And also al-Mahroom, the one who is deprived of livelihood and doesn't ask, he is also eligible to be part of the person's wealth. So basically, devotion to Allah through salat and devotion to helping other people through their sadaqah, their charity and their altruism. We continue with that in ayah number 26. وَالَّذِينَ يُصَدِّقُونَ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ, those who confirm the veracity, the truthfulness of the day of judgment. يُصَدِّقُونَ, a bit more than belief. It's a bit more than affirm. It's more of confirming with conviction that they know about and they believe in and they prepare for the day of jaza, deen and hisab and judgment, basically. So this is an inner conviction that their life and their worldview and their lifestyle represents the reality of the day of judgment. So anything they do will be filtered through their belief in the last day. So if they do something, they will weigh and measure the benefit and harm according to the last day. So there are many ways to analyze, appropriate, and form a world view and a lifestyle. So these people who are favored by Allah, they testify, they affirm, they confirm, and they make true that they believe in the day of judgment. So they won't do anything to jeopardize their falah, their success on the day of judgment. So if there's a choice to be made, their choice will be rendered according to the final outcome on the day of judgment. So it's how they are driven into doing and how their actions are guided by the eventual fate of human beings on the day of judgment. So it's a measure and a yardstick of taqwa. And that's why it is important that you know that the day of judgment is true and Allah will audit me and my actions. So they won't do anything just to substantiate the immediate desires and pleasures of this world. They will delay sometimes pleasure until the akhirah. So that is how. So this يصدقون بيوم الدين is a code of behavior, is a code of conduct. And so they confirm and they testify to the day of judgment through their actions, not just by saying the day of judgment is true. And that is followed by another value. And that value is وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ. That these people, they are fearful of their Lord's punishment. They are fearful, mushfiqun, meaning they are intimidated by the possibility of punishment from their Rabb, from their Lord. Meaning Allah raises them, Allah disciplines them, Allah manages them and their affairs. They are afraid that Allah might just punish me if I do the wrong thing. So this is another value that they have, and it's internal. It has to be internalized. It's not necessarily something that's vocalized, but it is displayed in their behavior and in their actions and their transactions and so on. Inna adhaba rabbihim ghayru ma'mun. The truth is that the punishment of their Lord is not secure. Meaning people cannot be so presumptuous, complacent that their Lord will not punish them. So the Lord has the ability to punish, and the Lord has the ability to reward also. So they say it can go this way or that way, but Allah just might punish. So that possibility leads them to a level of taqwa, because they know Allah is more than capable of punishment, and that is not against the idea of being a Rabb, someone who fosters, raises and trains people for the best. Allah, who is the Rabb, wants everybody to reach their ultimate destination and potential without harming themselves, and that is Allah, the Rabb. So these people, they are amongst those who are not greedy and those who do not panic, and they are safe and secure. So this is how it is. So that is how it is. The understanding is that this is internal. This is how they believe. This is how they internalize their Lord, and this is how they see their Lord in front of them, and so on. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. Then another essential value is maintaining social balance, maintaining behavior in society where they are not going to destroy society because of their rampant desires, the hedonous ways. So they're not just there to exploit the pleasures of the dunya, They maintain everything in equilibrium, a balance. They have a sense of order. So they don't want to disturb the order of the cosmos by disturbing relationships. So the translations. Those who are guardians of their private parts, furuj, their private parts, hafidhun, their guardians, and they take care of their private parts and they protect their private parts. They don't do anything that is lewd and immoral. They don't go after the opposite sex just because they happen to be there. So they follow an order, they follow a routine, they follow a system, a law that is of chastity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that those who understand the value of chastity are those who are the benefactors of society and human beings. One is that it might be that, okay, men and women are together, they meet each other. And then it's not a free society. There are rules and regulations as to how you can mix and mingle and so on. So that's also a lifestyle. It's a worldview. That what is Islam's worldview of illicit relationships? Okay. Promiscuity. Where unfortunately the whole world today is a victim of promiscuity and not being chaste. People don't want to promote chastity. People just say man and woman together is free and you don't need any shackles and boundaries. You can just do whatever you are tempted to do. So here the Quran exhorting human beings to think further than their noses, understand that once you open this floodgate of hedonism, free sex, then you have destroyed the whole fabric of not just civilization, society, you destroyed the whole universe. Because then the universe is in total imbalance. There's no equilibrium in the cosmos. So that's why the word hafidhun is very important. That they guard and they protect, manage their private parts. And so that has to be through a system where the system safeguards, number one, the need for human desire, the need to provide an outlet for human desire, temptation, and passion. And number two, a safeguard against immoral actions that lead to total destruction. Okay. Because there are going to be several possibilities. One is that the man and woman are not married. So that in itself is a total imbalance where union is only through Allah's permission. You can't have union without Allah's word. That's where the barakah is. So you need Allah's word that unites you. And that is through the institution of marriage, nikah. And there are rules for nikah and marriage, as you know. So one is that Islam does cater for the fulfillment of human needs, albeit sexual need and so on. But that is through a system. It is a regimented system. There is law and order because this is now going to be based on an agreement, understanding, a contract between the two parties. And anything that requires two parties has to be guided by law. It cannot be guided by just simple gratification and consensual, what do you call it, participation. So here the idea is mutual consent, that if two parties, male and female, meet and there's mutual consent, then you don't need an overriding law to say that it is allowed. Mutual consent opens the door for that kind of union. Islam says mutual consent is not enough. It has to be within the framework of a system, a guided, organized institution that aims to develop human beings and human society. And so number one, that it is recognized by law, by, in our case, Sharia, that this union is valid because there are two human beings involved, which requires supervision of the state, supervision of the community, of the society. Even though there may only be 2-3 witnesses to that, at least it is supervised and it is approved by law and by Sharia that after this, mutual consent is expressed in public with witnesses, then that union is blessed. But that's guarding. If you do it this way, if you fulfill your need this way through this institution, then you're guarding your private parts from corruption, okay, and from insecurity and from a total disaster in the cosmos. Right, so that's number one. So then the Quran then allows that illa ala azwajihim, except upon their azwaj, their spouses. So this word azwaj obviously doesn't mean partners, nor does it necessarily mean wives. It means legal, valid, okay, companion. And there are a lot of implications in the word azwaj. So it doesn't mean pairs, because man and woman meeting with mutual consent, they could be seen as a pair, as azwaj, but that's not what the word means. Here the word refers to the Islamic understanding of the word, not the literal understanding. And there are many ways to read the Quran. One is literally, what does it mean? And then the other is, what does it mean in Sharia according to the Sunnah? So we read the Quran according to the Sharia, according to the Sunnah. What does the word azwaj mean in the Sharia? So that's what the meaning here is. Okay. So in the Sharia, azwaj is when you institutionalize the union in the name of Allah through nikah and witnesses. So it's a social order. It's not just a private order where people think that being married is a private affair. So Islam says no, it is private. The union is private, but the contract is social. The union of male and female, that is private, meaning you can't interfere with that. But the outward understanding is that it is a social contract where there is legal process. And that is why you need other people involved in the marriage contract. The qadi, the judge, the one who's performing the nikah, the witnesses, institution of, both sides of the parents coming together, making it a social event and not a private romance. So, right, so that's why you socialize an event, even though the details of the union are private and they should not be exposed at all in public. So this azwaj then refers to partners, husband and wife, who take care of each other, not just fulfill and satisfy the sexual need and impulse. Okay? Okay. So this is in reference to what some people might see as a valid union. So in this country, mutual consent is a valid union. There's nothing illegal about it. And there are some people from the so-called unorthodox Muslim groups that believe in this kind of union through something called mut'ah. Mut'ah is when a man or a woman proposes that they stay together in union for a short period of time in exchange for some money or something. So that is false. Okay? That union is also false. Meaning you're going the same way as mutual consent. In mutual consent, there's no agreement. You just do what you do. But in mut'ah, you're trying to institutionalize now prostitution. That a woman can be with a man in exchange for some favors. But there's no legal binding there. That person is neither her husband nor his wife. So no rules of marriage will apply there. And since the term is limited, marriage in Islam is not seen as limited. It is unlimited. In fact, it is eternal. You get married in Islam to be with your spouse in Jannah, okay? Not just in the dunya. So meaning that the temporal arrangement and the limited arrangement of being together for 1 week or 1 month or 3 months is not a valid philosophy of marriage. It's not marriage. So then it will not qualify to be azwaj. So meaning that union through mut'ah is not what's meant here. That is excluded. And so on and so forth. So you cannot use this ayah to say that they have mutual consent and they have an agreement. They may even have witnesses, but the purpose of marriage is that marriage has to be everlasting. If your niyyah is to divorce your wife after a while, then that's mut'ah. It's not allowed. Okay? You can't do that. Okay? That is a false niyyah. And so there we have to understand that this is one institution that a human civilization must establish as a rule for maintaining law and order, a rule for maintaining balance, what do you call it? Equilibrium in the cosmos. It disturbs everything else if you don't. Right? So there are just so many problems with the idea of a temporary arrangement for sexual gratification. That is not as what is meant here. Illa ala azwajihim, meaning you must be a zawj. A zawj is when husband and wife are responsible for each other's welfare. Not just sexual, but physical also. You're both responsible to protect the integrity of your social order through the institution of marriage. So the wife is also obligated to protect the husband's physical well-being, not in the sense of earning money or paying for the bills, but in the sense of making sure that she provides enough comfort and security for the man, so the man stays with her. So it's is that sense that there is a social responsibility. Islam says you cannot take on a contract without agreeing to bear the burden of responsibility. Right? So a man has to take care of the woman, a woman has to take care of the man. That's the responsibility. If you're not responsible and you live in hedonism, then that's not the way of a human society. It's the way of animals where they don't have responsibility whatsoever. Anyway, so this is what is meant by those who guard and protect their private parts, except with their azwaj, except with their partners who are legal, Islamically legal. Then they must now, make do with that institution. Otherwise, they must be patient. Sabr there is the order that you have to have sabr and patience, even if it's sometimes difficult and so on. So that is how it is. أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين. Or they fulfill their need with what their right hands own, referring to, slave girls. It's not an issue anymore, hopefully. But in those days when slavery was still valid and allowed, and you could have a slave girl who is now under your jurisdiction, legal jurisdiction, and also legal protection. And she would be living with you, and you would be feeding her, you'll be clothing her, you'll be taking care of her, and you'll be giving her protection and amnesty in the community. That is what is meant there. Meaning, is the ma malakat aymanum refers to human beings who are owned by other human beings through the institution of Islamic and lawful, what you call ownership. Malakat refers to owning. So there's ownership there. Again, you can't just pick up any girl from the streets and bring her home, even though she's not a free woman. There is a process there. You have to be a legal owner of that person. All right. So this is where it was allowed when slavery was still valid, but no, it's no longer valid. So it's a mute point. So. All right. فإنهم غير ملومين, for they will not be blamed if they fulfill their needs through the institution of marriage or through the institution of valid slavery within the laws of Sharia and Islam. So, فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون. Those who seek anything beyond this, then they definitely are transgressors. So anyone who seeks to fulfill their need, their sexual need, outside of these two institutions, they are sinners. They are transgressors. They are transgressing against human civilization, against society. They are ripping apart the social fabric of human beings. Right. So when you transgress, obviously, you are destroying the rights of other people. Here, that is not just that you have meet somebody in a dark alley or very secretly, and nobody else knows, or you think nobody else knows. There's always somebody who knows. Okay, and that is a transgression against society. Adun, that's adawa. And you're going beyond the rules of social behavior. And that is why you are a zalim. You are an unjust person. Even though other parties do not know about it. So if somebody has a secret affair with a married person and they feel I'm not doing anybody any harm, the husband or the wife doesn't know, then Allah says it doesn't matter whether they know, Allah knows. And that will appear on the day of judgment as a real dhulm, and injustice. Okay, so there, it's very difficult. Okay. Obviously, you're going to say that there are temptations and all that. So, I mean, the temptations and the distractions that are with us today are man-made. So you have, naked women on billboards, and you have nudity everywhere, and there's only talk of trash. You have pornography, which is cheaper than water. So then society has to contain and measure the distractions so that they don't, or society doesn't promote the immorality and the filth in the community. So that is something that is a human responsibility. And say, well, I'm tempted so much. I go to work, I see people, I see the opposite sex, and I have needs, I have desires, and I can't help myself. So that's on you. That's not Allah. Willingly accepted to live in a place where there's nothing except temptations. So if you're going to go for a swim in a pool, and you willingly jump in the pool, that's on you. No one's forcing you. So under that responsibility of protecting and guarding, protecting, guarding is on you. Okay. If the community and environment around you doesn't help you, then you have to do something that it does help you. It's not an excuse. That being thrown into the cesspit of sexual gratification is not an excuse for you to go overboard. Yeah, that's still on you. You're still responsible. You are still mukallaf. Anyway, so that's where the sabr comes in. That's where you have to guard yourself and protect yourself and so on. فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. They are transgressors of the worst type, because they assume they're not transgressing when they are, which is almost like a munafiq, basically. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. Now going from a kind of micro social order in terms of nikah, we're going into a macro social order in terms of those who are consistent and careful with their trusts and with their covenants and their treaties and their agreements. So this has many manifestations. There are different levels of trust that we have in society. This Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, first you manage your connection with Allah in terms of being constant in your salat, and then you become, mindful of your belief in the akhirah and inducing taqwa into you, your behavior. And number three, you start to think about your social contracts. The first one is marriage. The second is any contract where you have an obligation and duty to another party. That is called amana. Amana is a trust, okay? And there are various types of trust. One trust is to, obviously, Allah, that you have entrusted yourself to the covenant of Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we said yes. So that's the trust. So Allah has given us a trust that we will fulfill Allah's now covenant throughout our lives. That's an amana. So that is the macro of all macro amanat. And so that is something. And then we have a trust with our parents in terms of, relationships. Every relationship is a trust. So if you have parents, then your relationship with your parents is an amana. If you have children, then that is a trust. And you must fulfill your amana with your children. If you have now neighbors, that is a trust. Fulfill your amana with your neighbors. If you have business partners, that's an amana. Fulfill your trust with your business partners. Don't cheat and lie and steal and deceive and all of that. If you have now have an amana with the ruler, the hakim, whether Muslim land or non-Muslim land, that is a trust. You must fulfill your trust with the ruler that rules you, whether here in Darul Kufr or in Darul Islam. That's an amana. That is what we call a bay'ah. It's a transaction, bay'ah. There's mutual consent. I am going to lead you and you're going to follow me. So that's a trust, that's an amana. All right. So there are so many forms of that. If you're a student and teacher, that's an amana. And whatever social contract you have, whenever you are involved with another human being other than you, that is an amana. So you have to fulfill it. Even if you're taking care of animals and you have a pet animal, that's an amana. Take care of that. So this is a very comprehensive understanding of how human beings should behave in society. Islam is a social order. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you will be questioned about your amanat, your trust that you have with all living things. That's one. Aman. Ahad is much stronger than that. It has to do with treaties and covenants. And so they would be more national and international and so on. So there is no way that a human being is going to escape the responsibility of maintaining a social order based on amana, based on trust, goodwill, and so on. So these people, if they live this way, then they are maintaining the equilibrium in the cosmos, the equilibrium in society. And they are now benefactors of the human race. They are doing everything to make sure the human race not just survives but thrives, and so on. So this is a responsibility, and it's a commitment to a very noble responsibility. People who don't want to be responsible, we say they are irresponsible, and so you can't give them any assignment, and you have to make sure they're not in charge of any other assignment or human being, and so on. Yeah, so that's how we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a comprehensive order. Everybody reads Greek order, Plato's Republic, and all those other, political governing philosophies that you have now, you're accustomed to it. And then obviously you have in this country the onslaught of the, American Constitution. That is how your mind works, and you're going to go through the process of understanding human rights and all of those are kind of political, what do you call it, buzzwords. The Quran mentions this, much earlier, that this is more of a divine covenant. One is you have a covenant with Allah Himself, which is your belief in Allah as one, and you believe in the Rasul as the last Rasul, which is also covenant, and the belief in the Akhirah, which is also covenant. So now you have included all of human behavior, whether it's mental or whether it's intellectual. And now you've included social order, your trust with everybody. So once you have this comprehensive outlook, then this is your manifesto for the, the profound felicity and happiness for human beings. In the pursuit of happiness, they say. Meaning, if you read these ayat and apply them in society the way they are meant to be, you'll see there's no need for you to, what do you call it, reinvent the wheel and talk about, Plato or the U.S. Constitution. It's right here, and this is how Prophet trained and developed the Sahaba. In Medina, they were already following the laws of the cosmic reality and the universal order of behavior. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now saying that if you mend yourselves socially through understanding that every contract is part of a social order and you must fulfill that contract as an amana, as a trust. Are you trustworthy or not? And then if you have ties with the international community or with the government, then you must fulfill those treaties and those contracts also. So if a Muslim country goes into a contract, a treaty with a non-Muslim country, they have to see it through. And that's how we've always behaved in terms of Islamic international relationships. We had a great scholar called Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, one of the better students of Abu Hanifa. He was the first person in human history to write about international treaties. He wrote it, he documented it in fiqh. Right? Why did he do that? Because all based on this, based on the Quran. That the Quran gives us guidance and hidayah to behave in human society at every level, whether it's the private level with husband and wife, or the social level with a family unit, or a community level where you have interaction, transactions, or whether it's at the economic level or governmental level or international level. The Quran has already guided us as to what we should do and how we should do it. And that is why the books of fiqh cover everything there is to cover in human society. You don't need to go outside of fiqh. The fiqh that was documented, written by the classical scholars, okay, far more piercing and far-reaching than modern law, okay, American law, or any other law, okay, where that law is good in terms of social contracts and everything else, but it's not good for human behavior. That law, Western law, otherwise known as secular law, doesn't account for ibadah, which is half of human beings' life. Whereas our law starts with the rules of wudu and tahara. Islamic law starts with wudu and tahara. Western law starts with contracts. I mean, it's truncated. It's only half the story. You only get half the story. When you study Islamic law, you're going to study all your commitments to Allah, which is part of your huququllah. Allah has rights too. And it will cover huququl ibad, the rights of other people. So now you have a manifesto that is comprehensive and it is holistic and it covers everything that a human being does. Not just theoretically, but practically. So what is our covenant with Allah? Okay. So Allah has the right to be worshipped without being associated with. So who talks about that? Muslims. The Quran speaks about it. The Rasul speak about it. The Anbiya are here to uphold the rights of Allah. Um, so we've always had huququllah, the rights of Allah, and so they named it huquq. This was 1,000 years before any talk of rights came into the political arena. Rights is now a political word. It's not a real word. It is distorted by post-American enlightenment thinking. But haqq is something that is an absolute right. So Allah has huquq, He has huquq, absolute rights and prerogatives to be worshipped alone without any partner. That's His right. So who is there to uphold the right of Allah to be worshipped this way? The Anbiya. They come to do this. Okay. And then the ulama who now follow them, they will speak about the rights of Allah. Praying is a haqq of Allah. Giving zakat is a haqq of Allah. Fasting is a haqq of Allah. Going for Hajj and Umrah is a haqq of Allah. That's the haqq. It is a duty. It's a right. It's a responsibility that human beings must perform. But if half of your system doesn't even recognize that God exists and that God has rights, then what kind of felicity are you now promoting? What kind of happiness are you promoting? Then the Creator is nowhere in your equation. It's nowhere in your mind. It's not even in your, your books of study. It's not in your academia. It's not in your pedagogy. So no, we are divorced. And the reason why we are so advanced after the Renaissance is because we finally killed God. I mean, the secret of the so-called progress through the Renaissance is that we just, remove God from everything. So they found that removing God is the key to success. That can't be Muslim, because in Muslims, the pillars of Islam are all the rights of God. The 5 pillars of Islam, what do they talk about? They don't talk about human rights. That you testify and there's no one there besides Allah, and you testify Muhammad is the Rasul, and you establish your salat, and you give your zakat, and you fast, and you go for Hajj. These are God rights. They're not human rights. So that's your Islam. Now, if you are going to go backwards and say, let's redefine Islam, then the only way you can redefine Islam is if you remove God from the equation, which is the secret of the Renaissance. Right? Yeah. So we're not in a good position to understand rights. You can only understand human rights if you understand God's rights. This is Allah's right, and then people must be there to advocate Allah's rights, legally, formally, institutionally, whatever. Who does that? The Anbiya and those who follow them. But if you're going to say that, look at these ayat are saying that, these man is terrified with the idea of talking about God's rights. You can't talk about religion. You can't talk about God's rights. That's private. You can't interfere with the private sector. Leave that private. It's between a man and his God. Well, Allah is for everybody. That's why He is Rabbul Alameen. He's the Lord of all the worlds, and He's Rabbul Nas. He's the Lord of all people. So He's the Lord of all people. We have to debate and discuss what is there in His order to maintain a balance, an equilibrium, a stability in the cosmos. Because if you remove one side, There's no balance. It's going to be lopsided. Everything will be flipped. Everything will be topsy-turvy. Everybody will be upside down. Everything will be upside down, inside out. And so there'll be no equilibrium. There'll be no order. So the Quran's now, what you call it, instruction of understanding these values. These we mentioned 7 values. So how are we going to mention? Well, we mentioned 6 values, 7 values. And then once you incorporate all 8 values into your community, you have to remember that the Quran is being revealed to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca. Understand the context. In Mecca, there are barely a handful of Muslims. But you have these international dynamic values that the Quran is expressing. This is for a world order. So the question is, why is a world order and a true manifesto being given to a few people in Mecca where nobody cares for them anyway? What are these people going to do? How are they going to change the world? There's only a handful of them. There are barely 100 people who made hijrah. Barely. And 2/3 of the Quran was revealed where? In Mecca. That's the question. Why is 2/3 of the Quran being revealed in Mecca where there are barely 100 Muslims? How are they going to change and revolutionize the world with this message? Well, that's how Nabuwa works. Nabuwa doesn't work based on the corporate ideals of P&L. Doesn't work that way. It works on realistic ideals being revealed. Once Allah reveals an ayah, that is now permanent. It is eternal. It is forever. It will have an impact whether today or tomorrow. So Allah knows that there's only a handful of Muslims in Mecca. Allah knows that He's revealing these super dynamic values as a charter for human success to these few people because He knows that the message will spread and He'll facilitate it. So it doesn't matter how many people are there, it depends on what these few people will do with that message. So the message is universal. It applies to everybody. Okay, and that is how we must see the value of revelation, tanzeel, that which comes down from the divine to human beings for human success. So that these values are immeasurable in terms of their efficacy, in terms of their importance, in terms of their value, and in terms of their ihsan, and so on. So I'm saying is that we must appreciate that the Quran will talk about both types of amanat. One is the amana towards Allah, and the other is the amana towards His creation, both types. And these ayat summarize this reality and this haqq and the truth which has been revealed. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Allah give us tawfiq to read the Quran, to understand the Quran, and to apply the Quran. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen wa sallallahu ta'ala Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatillah. Alhamdulillah. We'll do salat in about 5 minutes, inshallah.